Do you know what the source of your retirement income is going to be? Will your income last as long as you do? Well, joining us today is one of the nation's leading experts on retirement income planning, Tom Hegna, author of the book Paychecks and Playchecks, to share what he's learned in his recently released book, Retirement Income Masters, where he interviews 14 of the nation's top income planning advisors and give us a little bit of insight of what we should be thinking about so that our retirement income lasts as long as we do. Welcome, Tom.
Thanks, Jim. It's great to be with you again.
Hey, it's fantastic, and I know you've been traveling the world basically, not only educating advisors, but also their clients. You had a great run with your book, Paychecks and Playchecks. Americans are being forced to wake up to this metamorphosis. It used to be all about how much money you had in your bank account and what it was, not what it does, which is provide income in retirement. And there's really been a transition, especially with bond rates low, that people really have to have a strategy, especially if they're going to be spending 30, 40 years in retirement. And I know you just did a follow-up sequel book, which is Retirement Income Masters, where you actually interviewed some of the best in the country. What prompted you to do that? I thought your book Paychecks and Playchecks just hit the ball square in the money and did such a great job. So what prompted you to do this follow-up book?
Yeah, well, Jim, Paychecks and Playchecks has had a great run. It still is number one on Amazon in its category. It sells a lot of copies. We have advisors buy it by the case. So Paychecks and Playchecks is still a very valid book. What I did with Retirement Income Masters was I said, look, okay, Paychecks and Playchecks was the math and science behind a successful retirement. It was really my words, my language, my stories that have been working for 25 years. But I'm not the only one in the retirement income space. And so what I did is I went around the country and I found 14 top retirement income pros. And each chapter is their story. What do they do? How do they explain this? What is their process? And so it's really like 14 books in one because each chapter stands alone. It's not like each chapter sets up another chapter. It's 14 separate chapters, 14 different stories, 14 different top professionals, and it's an amazing book. You get great stories from other people, so you get many points of view. There's some great people in there. Many of them are top-of-the-table advisors. You know, Rao Garuda came from India with $7 in his pocket. He made 21 consecutive top-of-the-table qualifications. You got Christy Mueller, who's probably written more lifetime income than any other woman on the planet. You got John Schwan, who might have written more lifetime income than any other man on the planet. You got Curtis Cloak, Dr. Dia, the king of deferred income annuities. There's Michael Kitces, who doesn't even really believe in annuities that much. He's a financial planning guy. But I put his chapter in there, and we kind of argue back and forth the whole chapter. It's a very interesting chapter. And there's many others. So it's just some top producers and what is their strategy, how do they do it. So I think between those two books, you can really dominate that retirement income market.
That sounds awesome. I know several of those people have been past guests on our program. The retirement income story is really something. I mean, right now, why do you see retirement different for retirees today than was for people who lived 20, 30 years ago? And I know we kind of touched upon this in the beginning, but there really is a transformation. A lot of people have to have a different mindset today. So share with us what you see with that.
Yeah, well, it's different and it's the same. And the difference is that in the past you got guaranteed lifetime income from your employer. Everybody had pensions, and very few people worried about their savings because with Social Security and pensions, they could live a comfortable retirement. Well, the need for guaranteed lifetime income hasn't changed, but the source has changed. You don't get it from your employer anymore. You have to go out and buy some guaranteed lifetime income. And, Jim, the real paradigm shift is this. It's exactly what you were saying. We've all been taught about growing our assets, and it's about how big we make our pile, and it's all about asset accumulation. But when you really study retirement, it's not about assets. It's not about assets. See, your assets can be lost. They can be stolen. They can be swindled. They can be sued. They can be divorced. They can be decimated in a market crash. The ultimate success of your retirement is all about income, and I would argue guaranteed lifetime income, and then also taking key risks off the table. So your retirement is not about your assets. It's all about guaranteed lifetime income and have you taken the key risks off the table. That's a huge paradigm shift. It takes advisors a while to get that, and it's going to take even longer for clients to get that. But I'm over that hump now, and it's all about income and risk management. That's what it's all about.
You know, it's interesting. I do a lot of family meetings, and what's really difficult, the parents get it because they're afraid that they might run out of money, and they're used to the old CD rates of 8, 9, 10, and even more %. 4%, and with CD rates under 1%, you got to have a boatload of money just to have a modest living. And the kids, this is where I really have challenges helping the parents get to the right place, because the kids are thinking rate of return, rate of return, rate of return, because they have the mindset it might not be 10 or 15 or 20 years before they're drawing on it. But that sequence of returns really becomes quite risky, and I know that's one of the issues of longevity, and you say in your book longevity is the biggest risk. I agree. What's your perspective on how that risk is the greatest risk?
Yeah, so Jim, you named a bunch of the risks. There's market risk. The market can crash. There's order of return risk or sequence of returns that you could average 10% a year, but if you just take out 5% a year, you can go broke, because if you lose money in the first few years of retirement, you really go into a death spiral, and average returns mean nothing in retirement. It's all about the order or sequence of those returns. Many people don't understand that. There's the risk of long-term care. There's the risk of inflation. I would also argue there's a risk of deflation. So there's many risks in retirement, but there's only one number one risk, and that number one risk by far is longevity risk, because longevity is not just a risk, it's a risk multiplier of all the other risks. Because just like you said, the longer you live, the more likely the market could crash. The longer you live, the more likely the sequence of returns will decimate your portfolio. The longer you live, the more likely we'll have inflation. The longer you live, the more likely you'll need long-term care. If you retired at age 65 and you drop dead at age 68, it wouldn't matter if the market crashed 4,000 points. It wouldn't matter if inflation was 12%. It wouldn't matter if you were drawing 10% a year. It wouldn't matter if you forgot to buy long-term care. You didn't live long enough. But if you live to be 85, 90, or 95, it's all those other risks that can wipe you out. So what math and science says is you must take longevity risk off the table.
Those are all great points, Tom. Is there a best way to retire today? What are some of the simple steps people should consider?
Yeah, so there is not a best way. What I say is there's an optimal way. If we're honest about it, nobody knows what the best is going to be. I mean, if gold goes up to $10,000 an ounce, we should all put our money in gold. If oil goes to $1,000 a barrel, we should all put our money in oil. If the Dow Jones hits 100,000 in the next 5 years, we should all put our money in the Dow Jones. Nobody knows what's going to be best. What math and science comes to is what is the optimal solution. And the optimal is really what's your best chance of having the best. Which solution will be the best more often than any other will be the best, and which will never be the worst. That's the optimal solution. The optimal solution, I think, is clear in that you've got to cover those basic expenses with guaranteed lifetime income. You've got to protect yourself against inflation. You've got to have a plan for long-term care. And I would argue that the most efficient way to pass your wealth to your children and grandchildren when you die is with permanent life insurance. And a lot of people think life insurance has nothing to do with retirement. I would argue life insurance has everything to do with retirement, and we can maybe talk about that in your second segment of this show.
Well, you teed me up perfect, Tom. It is time for a quick break. And when we return, we'll talk about some of these solutions that you might want to consider to make sure that your income lasts as long as you do. So please stay tuned.
Having a conversation with your child is like putting money in the bank. For example, every time you ask your child,
"So, how was your day?"
you've just added to your conversation trust account. And when you say to your child,
"Good job, son,"
you get double deposits. And the more you ask, the more you put away. And it's good advice to... excuse me. And it's good advice to have... Stop that! And it's good advice to have little chats with your child as often as you can. Thank you. Because someday, when they're teenagers, it may pay off big dividends.
Dad, can I ask you something?
Give your family everything. Give them your time.
Thanks, Dad. I think you're right.
Welcome back as we continue to visit with Tom Hegna. Tom, I know you've spoken around the country on retirement planning. You're the author of Paycheck and Playchecks, and just recently you interviewed some of the retirement income masters around the country and published a book under the same title. You've got a program coming up on PBS that our listeners might be interested in. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. It's a public television special. It's going to be titled Don't Worry, Retire Happy. And I've already filmed it and filmed in front of a live audience. It's going to go live in December and January. It should go nationwide. And there'll be more information coming out of which cities on which days. But this is really for clients, okay? This is the general public that's going to get the real way to retire optimally. And I'm teaching people how to retire. You got to have guaranteed income, the proper use of life insurance, proper use of long-term care. That's what I do. But I need a financial professional who says, okay, Tom, now let's take this down and get the exact right product at the exact right time. And I need a professional for that. So even me, who I consider myself a retirement income expert, I don't do it myself. I have somebody help me.
It's interesting as you're talking about that. I was just at the $1 Million Roundtable, which is an international association that has a meeting once a year, and people come from all over the world to share ideas and learn. And I know one of the guest speakers there, he had done a survey and he wrote a book about Business Brilliant. He surveyed all these wealthy people, and he worked together with Prince & Associates. They did some other surveys, and there's one that just stuck with me, and that is, what do you do well that makes you money? And the average middle-class person was around 6. The ultra-high net worth was 1 to 2. So it goes to show you, if you try to do everything yourself, you might be able to accomplish it all, but you're probably not doing any of it very well. The moral of the story just reconfirms what you're talking about. Work with experts. Do what you do well, but use experts to do this, because it's hard as a financial professional myself to keep on top of all that, and that's all I do. I can't even imagine someone who's got no knowledge of the industry and no background, even what questions to ask if they're trying to do it themselves. It just seems impossible. When you talk about some of these talking heads, they've got these one-size-fits-all solutions that they recommend. I think you see it all the time. I mean, everybody's situation is different, and there is a level of customization that's necessary for some optimization, as you talked about earlier.
Yeah, and there's so many new products coming out. I mean, I'll just give you an example, Jim. In the long-term care area, everybody's concerned because premiums are going up on some of these long-term care policies, and a lot of companies are pulling out. These changes are happening all the time. They're happening rapidly. You've got to have a professional who can stay on top of some of this.
It's interesting. I could even speak of my own family. Well-meaning kids. We had set up a long-term care insurance policy for one of our family members, and other kids got involved, said, oh, we'll take care of you. Then when the time came, they ran out of shifts to take care of the person, and now they let this policy go that would have taken care of all the bills. Yeah. And the thing is, being realistic, I think that's, they talk about the first step to recovery for alcoholics is admitting you have a problem. I think a lot of people are blindly sticking their heads in the sand saying, well, it ain't going to happen to me. Do you see that?
I see it all the time, especially with long-term care, but I'm now going through that with both my parents. Thank goodness I made them buy a policy about 15 or 16 years ago. They didn't buy it from me. They bought it from somebody else, which was fine. I just wanted them to have a policy. I would say it's not a perfect policy, but here's what I'll tell you. It's great policy to have right now because they each got a bucket of money of about $250,000 each. Not a lot, not going to last them forever, but they've got pensions, they've got Social Security, they got other stuff. This will literally be a miracle for the family and allow them to live in dignity for many years before we do have a financial issue. And I mean, I'm not saying we never would, but I'm saying for the next, 8 or 10 or 12 years, this is going to be a miracle for the family and for my parents.
All excellent points. And the thing that I always tell people is you owe it to yourself to understand what the issues can be, what the potential solutions are, because most people have preconceived notions. And as you mentioned, there's new products coming out every day that can solve many different issues. It's just a matter of positioning your money and positioning your planning in a certain way to protect you against those types of events. Hey, let's talk a little bit about what are some of the ways to get most out of your retirement accounts, those IRAs and 401ks.
It really depends on a person's situation, but I'm a big believer in these deferred income annuities. We sat down, we decided how much money we wanted to give to our kids. That was one of the first steps. We bought life insurance, paid off that life insurance. That's going to the kids. Now guess what we can do with all the rest of our money? It gives us a license to spend that money. So I had talked earlier that some people think life insurance has nothing to do with retirement. It's the permanent life insurance you bring into retirement that gives you the license to spend and enjoy your years in retirement. And as you know, most people out there are not fully enjoying their retirement. They're living this just-in-case retirement. And then what happens? They die. What happens? The money goes to kids. And then what do the kids do with it? They go on the cruise. They join the country club. They do all the things that the person said they were going to do because the person lived a just-in-case retirement. And if you've got life insurance, you don't have to live a just-in-case retirement. You can live a bold retirement.
Well put. And I know one of the sayings that's out there is buy income and invest the difference. And whether you're
Yeah.
investing that difference in life insurance for legacy goals for your family, maybe you want to still try to hit those home runs in the marketplace, you still have those opportunities. But man, when they invented retirement, it really was for people that lived a really, really long time beyond life expectancy. You look at Social Security when it was invented, the average life expectancy is you'd be dead basically 6 months before your first check. Well, now people are going to live 30, 40, maybe 50 years in retirement. You don't want to be saying, welcome to Walmart, or would you like fries with that when you're 85 years old because your money ran out. Number one, I don't know what your prospects of being hired at that time are, but boy, to be old and broke doesn't look very attractive. And what you talk about, these guaranteed lifetime incomes, obviously they're backed up with contracts and insurance companies, and you got to look into that to make sure that the companies that you're working with you feel comfortable with. But what you talk about, laddering and diversifying, it always makes sense. Whether you're buying income or investing in the marketplace, you want to be diversified.
You also have to remember that asset allocation and diversification do not assure or guarantee better performance and cannot eliminate the risk of investment loss.
Absolutely, and I would encourage people, if they're not in the retirement income space, to get in the retirement income space, learn the retirement income business, learn the words, the language to help clients retire successfully.
Tom, I know you don't sell product other than you have a lot of educational tools that can help people understand these concepts a little bit better. Obviously, you have your books, but you also have a website and a place for people to go to. Why don't you share with our audience what resources you have available?
Sure. There's going to be a whole consumer website for this public television special. It's going to be Don't Worry, Retire Happy is the title, and that's going to be the name of the book. There's going to be Retire Happy University. So be looking for that. But you can get information on all that at tomhegna.com. There's a lot of free videos on tomhegna.com. There's a way to purchase the book if you want the book or the audiobooks. So I would say tomhegna.com is the place to go, and then from there it can take you to the Don't Worry, Retire Happy websites that will be coming up in the next few months, Jim.
Hey, Tom, always a pleasure. I love what you're doing and how you're educating people. I just want to close with a mutual friend of ours, Joe Jordan. He was a guest on our program a while back, and he's a big proponent of income as well. And he talks about how Americans kind of got out of adjustment. And I can't remember what book he talked about, but he said, you know, back in the 1880s, there's a popular romance novel of the most eligible bachelor in England. And apparently his income was something like £10,000 a month, which would be pretty good in England today. But back in the 1880s, that was really something. They didn't talk about net worth. It was all about cash flow. And as people are living longer, cash flow is king. Not cash, but cash flow. So thanks again, Tom.
Thank you, Jim. Great to be with you.
And remember, guarantees are based on the claims-paying ability of the issuer. Thanks for joining us this week, and tune in again next week as we explore another phase of the real wealth process. And remember, if anything you heard in today's show you'd like to get more information about, contact your real wealth advisor. Also, if you feel that any of this information will be helpful to a friend or family member, just click the Forward to a Friend button.